Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all and all those that are attending this webinar, not just from the Middle East, but across the world, covering the UK, Europe, Asia, and many other areas too. Sincere apologies for the late start. We had a couple of technical issues. Those of you that tune into this webinar series will know that David normally comes on and does the introductions. Unfortunately, we've had some technical issues, so you're going to have to make do with me instead. It is my absolute pleasure to be with you today, hosting the 5th episode in the IWFM UAE webinar series. Today's topic is an extremely important one, and it's also very close to my heart. People of determination in modern society. How can the FM sector best respond to such needs? Now, as FM professionals, we are very much used to discussing topics related heavily to the operational and technical aspects of our industry. But I'm very keen in discussing subjects that are just as, and if not more, important and directly affect the end user and their overall experience from the assets we serve and maintain. So before I go on to introducing the panelists, what I'd like to do is just run you through some of the slides that are related to what we do here at IWFM. If I can have the next slide, please. So as usual, we have David Kerry, who's our producer. I'm going to be moderating our 3 panelists today: Evie Bostanzi, Emily Ray, Lionel Prodgers. I'll tell you a bit more about them in a little while. And on the next slide, just want a quick appreciation and thank you to our sponsors, Adib, Quality Refrigeration Air Conditioning, BFM, and Tafawuk, which is an Eltizam company. Next slide, please. So this is related to IWFM and our visions. I'm not going to go through it all. You can get all of the details on the website, but basically gives you an idea of what we do in terms of our vision and mission strategies. And again, because we're a little bit pressed for time, I won't go through the slides. I'll allow you to do that at your convenience when you visit the website. So just to round off our strategic aims, we've actually got a few of them. I believe there's 4. And this just summarizes what they are in general. So for more information on IWFM, on our foundation and what it is that we strive to do, please feel free to visit the website. All the information and details will be there. As I mentioned, today's webinar series is about people of determination. And we've got a fantastic lineup of panelists today. I'm thrilled to be joined by a superb team of panelists, 2 of which are actually from the FM industry, and we'll be talking about their experiences from a strategic FM and service provider perspective. We also have a very special guest who will be talking about her experiences as a mother of a child who personifies the term people of determination. We will discuss and address how and if, within their respective organizations and personal experiences, the current global pandemic and economic situation has brought this topic closer to the limelight, and how we as an FM industry can help provide services that deliver more inclusion and a better quality of life to all those in our society. So let's go ahead and welcome the panel. I think actually the next slide might have a schedule of what's going to be happening, which have gone. It's the normal schedule, what we normally run through. That's me, Sarah Momtaz. I think most of you are familiar with who I am. If we can have the next slide. And I'd like to talk a little bit about our panelists. So firstly, I'm very happy to welcome Evie Bostanzi. She's the General Manager of BFM, which is the FM arm of Bloom Properties. Evie has an EMBA from the London Business School and a BA in architecture. She has over 20 years of industry experience. Previously was a consultant with Ernst & Young and Mace, and her passion is to deliver sustainable, profitable growth for long-term value. Welcome, Evie, and thank you very much for joining us in today's discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Evie. Moving on, as I mentioned, we do have a very special speaker today, not someone from the FM industry, but actually a lady who is an advocate for pioneering awareness for people of determination with her own personal story. Emily Ray studied international management and modern languages at the University of Bath. She's also a professional photographer and French teacher. And she's renowned for raising awareness in the UAE for Angelman syndrome, which is a little known genetic disorder. And she actually managed to turn the Burj Khalifa blue in 2020, and I'm sure she'll be telling us how she done that. A very warm welcome to you, Emily, and thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
Thanks, Emily. Lastly, delighted to introduce another FM veteran. As our third panelist today, Lionel Prodgers is the Managing Director for Agents 4RM. Lionel is an international consultant who specializes in strategic management, organizational planning, and service standards. Previously worked with Siemens and Chesterton, and he's been in the facilities and property management industry for over 45 years, although he doesn't look like it, and working in Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Australasia. Lionel, very warm welcome, and thank you very much for joining today's discussion.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Makes me sound old.
Like I said, you don't look it, Lionel. Right, so before we start, I'd like to remind the attendees this is a very interactive session. Please get involved. As always, we will be having a questions and answers session at the end. If you wish to present a question to our panelists, please feel free to do so by stating your name and where in the world you're tuning in from. We'll be standing by to receive your messages, and time permitting, we'll try and answer as many as we can. In addition, after each of the discussion points, we'll be airing a straw poll to which there will be 3 possible options for you to choose from. Please select the answer that's most suited to you, bearing in mind that the straw poll is completely anonymous. Your details are not captured, so feel free to answer them as honestly as you can. As always, these webinar sessions are designed for you, our audience, so your input is very much welcomed. Finally, before we get into the first discussion point, a very quick reminder that the recording of today's session will be released on the IWFM website in due course. Now, with all those formalities out the way, let's get started. So we'll go straight into the first discussion point. Again, apologies for everyone listening in for the late start. Let's start with our first question, which is, what does the term people of determination mean to you and your organization? I'd like to start with you, please, Evie.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to start by highlighting how in the UAE the term people of determination replaces the universal term of disabled people with disabilities. And I think this is very significant because it is in recognition of their achievements and their capacity to achieve, which is not necessarily capitalized on. And I don't know if anybody has noticed, but even the logo is changed. So there is that stereotypical logo with a wheelchair, almost static chair, that has been replaced with another one which is almost mobile, and it signifies that transition from the disabled person that probably stays at home to an independent and very determined person that becomes part of the community and starts to contribute. And this is the vision, obviously, of our leadership, and I think it's very inspiring. And that's a promise of what is to come. Now, the question is about what this means to me, and starting from a personal perspective, I don't think I need to explain that it is unfair that any portion of the society is not provided with the same opportunities as everybody else to contribute, and there is no reason to explain that. And we essentially we are all inspired when we see people who, no matter what the challenges or the roadblocks that are presented to them from life, overcome and never give up and actually achieve things against all odds. And I have a personal example very quickly. I grew up and I spent all my school years in a swimming pool, dreaming of becoming an Olympian, going to the Olympics. And I always had these daydreams of having the right coach and the right facilities to achieve that. Obviously, I didn't go that far. But my son now is a swimmer, and his coach is a 3 times gold Olympian, and not in Olympics, in Paralympics. And we are all in awe of people who actually become Olympians, and let alone people who have to be so determined that their body is not complete, or mentally there is some sort of compromise, and they still achieve all that. And I cannot imagine a better role model for my son at this point in time than somebody who has been enabled by the environment and by their own mental and physical strength to achieve so much, regardless of their condition. I think that's something I will always be grateful to all those people that enabled that path for this person. Moving on to the business perspective, what I think we need to think of, what is it that businesses suffer from right now? And I don't think I'm alone in saying that engagement is an issue. It's a big issue, engagement of employees. And that's something that we have to see as an opportunity, potentially, from that perspective. All companies need a higher purpose, and all companies beyond that vision, fancy vision and mission statements that we all design, and we are all guilty of, there is that higher purpose that we're missing out on, probably. And I think that from my experience and my understanding, we all take pride in seeing ourselves and the people we work with realize their potential. And this is, in essence, the very zest of human motivation, that potential to realize all that we can be. And I think a mix of, even in the workplace, of people who are with mixed capabilities, achieving for themselves and for the community, can really make the world a much better, much more interesting place.
Absolutely.
Fully inclusive environment.
Inshallah. Evie, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the communities that you serve, how well have you done by applying initiatives for people of determination, such as facilities or amenities that you provide?
Well, by regulation, let's say, buildings are constructed in a way that they enable that access. The facilities are available for disabled access, how people are mobile around the building. So the basic requirements of the building fabric and providing access across the board is there. And I would say this is the most of, it's the physical aspect at this point that is covered.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Evie. Let's bring Emily into the discussion. Obviously not representing necessarily an organization, but your own personal experience.
Yeah, so the term people of determination, before my son was diagnosed with Angelman syndrome, which is a very rare genetic condition which nobody has ever heard of.
Yes.
He was diagnosed on the 6th of April 2017. So I effectively live life sort of with what we call before D-Day, so before diagnosis day, and after D-Day. And the minute the doctor said, well, Sam has got Angelman syndrome, my mother was there with me. We had no idea what he was talking about. And we also certainly didn't realize in the world in which we would now be thrust, really, because we had no real appreciation for what families of children with determination, or people of determination, adults as well, actually go through on a daily basis. He was 21 months old, and he hadn't been talking, and he wasn't crawling, and he wasn't walking, so we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what. And when you get that diagnosis, everything changes. Suddenly you have to understand what challenges there are going to be just leaving your home, and also just being in your home, because Sam can destroy everything there is in it. So various adaptations have to be made, both within the home and as you go outside the home and you attempt to integrate him into society, because he's not just a person or a child. He's not just going to stay at home. He is going to go out, and he is going to meet other people, and he is going to go into different buildings and different areas and so on. And I'm a teacher, so I had contact with children of determination, such as having autism, autistic spectrum disorder, Asperger's and so on, but nothing much more than that, really. And everybody seems to know about autism and Down syndrome, and nobody knows about Angelman, so I have been doing my very best to change that.
Excellent. And what have been the sort of significant factors that have come about? I mean, how have you raised awareness for this?
Well, when he was diagnosed, I was living in Fujairah, and I lived there for 12 years, and it's lovely, but it's a long way from most people, and it was very lonely. And so I decided that I would start raising awareness of him via Facebook groups and mums groups and so on. And people started to really become engaged with his story and what he represented, and the fact that he embodies really a child of determination. I mean, it can take him 2 years to master going up some steps, for example, but he's mastered it. He will now go up steps without holding someone's hand and without holding the wall. And you can never work out what his milestones are going to be until he actually achieves them. And so people got on board with this. They really wanted to start learning about him, learning about AS, learning about his challenges, because he has cognitive impairment, developmental delays, sleep issues, low muscle tone. There's a whole host of characteristics, really, for Angelman. And he started touching people, literally, figuratively. He reaches out to people, and people start wanting to follow his story and to learn how he's doing, and to understand that there is no limit. You just have to presume competence for your child and introduce your child to other people, because they won't come across Sam. If I stay in my house with him, they won't know anything about him. So he has no voice. He does not speak, not one single word. So I am his voice.
Very touching. Thank you, Emily. Lionel, over to you.
Yeah, I hadn't come across the expression people of determination outside of the UAE, so it intrigued me when I came across it. I have to say, I thought the federal government had done a fantastic job in changing the perception of people with special needs or disabilities, as we generally still refer to them elsewhere in the world. And another thing that caught me on the federal commentary, and I did attend the event last year in terms of the athletics event for people of determination. And I think that there's huge effort that's going into this area to change the mindset of those of us that are frankly quite ignorant of the scope that there is. And what strikes me also is that we are used to categorizing disabilities and special needs. I understand in society there needs to be a grouping, and one has to talk collectively about people with similar things or problems. But what struck me is also from the federal government was this pressure to, as they term it, look at the potential of individuals as opposed to their disability. So to me that was a mind-changing understanding that every single individual has potential, and I've got an example I hope to be able to relate later on. And when you understand that you can really impress on other people tolerance and acceptance through one individual act or one individual attention or support, then it starts to snowball and you can begin to roll out awareness and use these examples really just the way that Emily has, of bringing that awareness to a much wider group, which hopefully brings tolerance and brings more acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. Lionel, I mean, Emily touched on this a little while ago when we were talking about, you know, the Angelman syndrome, as you mentioned, is hardly spoken about or even really known of. From your perspective, most people are aware of provisions that are made for people with physical special needs. Do you think that more needs to be done in FM to accommodate those with intellectual special needs? And if so, what would they be?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like later on to talk more about social responsibility and corporate social responsibility, but I have a personal engagement and understanding of a young man in the UK who has Asperger's. And again, just beginning to understand one individual's talents has led me to understand that with people with Asperger's, individuals with Asperger's, many do have an intellectual and an artistic talent. I can't explain it, I'm not a medical person, can't explain why this is the case. But this one individual, his name is Ralph, has an absolutely unbelievable musical talent in being able to play the piano like a professional just by ear. He can't read music, but he can sit at a keyboard and play virtually anything that he hears, and extremely well. I'm not joking. And with a bit of effort and some inquiries, he's begun to play a couple of weeks in a shopping centre. Gets the care, gets the attention, gets the protection, and everyone has a ball. He's now famous in that context. People enjoy it.
People enjoy it, absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't occur to you until you understand this is even possible. And once you understand it's possible, then you can promulgate it, and hopefully that encourages people to do other things. So I don't think you necessarily have to change. I'm talking about the intellectual side of things. I don't think you can change necessarily physically buildings, but the facilities that we look after and the activities that go on within them can be applied or used in the context of engagement, which I would say in corporate social responsibility, we can do the same as well.
Absolutely. What a lovely story. Thank you, Lionel. That brings us on to the straw poll question. If we could please have the slide for that. Now, this is an opportunity for the lovely audience to get involved. 3 possible answers, as you can see. Please feel free to answer this question as honestly as you can, because as I mentioned earlier, it's completely anonymous. We do not capture any details. So the question is, in a COVID challenged work environment, I believe determination has taken a new priority for people around me. Option A, much less important and a lower profile than before. Option B, very much the same as previously, no real change. And the final option is it's now achieved much higher exposure and importance. And again, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, we'll just give you a few more seconds to answer. As I mentioned earlier on, we like to have these webinar sessions and discuss some topics that are not necessarily kind of in the core of FM, but at the end of the day, they do fall under our realm. So we very much appreciate and are grateful for those that are joining into this session, of course, the panelists as well. But your feedback and your involvement in the straw polls are also something that we very much appreciate. So give you a few more seconds, and then I think we can release the results. very interesting. So I'm surprised that we've got 21% that says it's less important than before. I kind of imagined it would have been B and C, quite honestly. That'll be kind of even Stevens. Thank you guys. Thanks very much for taking part in that poll. Let's go on to the next discussion point. So the next discussion point, which practical tasks or undertakings do you consider are readily achievable that will benefit or support people of determination in the workplace? And let's start with Evie, please. Evie, if you can just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, go back. Thanks, Evie.
So there are two elements here, and Lionel touched on that as well. There is the physical, the actual built environment side, and there is the emotional side, the culture of the business, let's say. So in the physical side, you have the buildings that are designed to enable access and enable benefit when people approach the building, the mobility, accessibility, having probably audio enhancements for people with hearing impairments. And we have seen that probably in RTA, for example, where all of that has been enabled. The parking spaces by default are available. In some cases, you can see docking stations for charging, electrical wheelchairs, and so on. It goes to a great extent, and this is all enabled by the government. Now, as a business and in the workplace, from our side, I will give you an example of how we look at that. And there is the culture of the business and how people see that inclusiveness in the workplace and when dealing with customers. So we have this very special philosophy of memorable service, because facilities management is a customer service industry, and it's all about the people we serve and the customers we serve and our internal customers. So this memorable service philosophy that we have designed is related to the behavior, the cultural behavior of people, and how their everyday actions reflect into the experience of their colleagues and their customers. So in that respect, when you have special needs customers or colleagues, when the common language of the business is that you are attentive to their special needs or their wants, and you customize your approach, and you have an empathy when it comes to serving others, then that really prepares the team for dealing with any kind of requirement of the customers. And we have a lot of residential properties as well, and that really comes handy. So I think it's as I think Lionel also touched on, culture is critical, and this somehow translates into that CSR strategy as well. But it goes beyond what is a strategy statement or a plan of action. It's the glue that brings people together and start feeling what is important when it comes to interacting with any human being. And I think that's really important, especially in this case now here. I can see the impact.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the residential assets. Obviously, you know, BFM look after a huge amount of residential assets. So in terms of the key principles that you have in place to ensure this inclusivity that you're talking about and the quality of life for the residents that are there, well, what do you think those would be, the sort of key principles that you apply?
I would say that we stick to our continuously training our people and having these campaigns on that cultural behavior, because beyond that technical skill and the ability to fix an AC or clean the bathrooms, the experience of your customer really is translated through how our people behave and how much they care about their customers. So we really focus on that. Anything technical, anything that comes with the ability to do the job, that is just the foundation. The bigger picture is about how we behave when it comes to the entire supply chain or the customer throughout. It's that common language of serving the customer in an elevated manner. At the same time, for sure, I think we're probably not doing enough. Now the determination, people of determination initiatives are picking up a lot more. And for sure, there is a lot more we can add to the agenda of our strategy. Picking up on things that are not necessarily enabling for the user, the end user, probably with surveys around the buildings specifically for that, and you know, initiatives like that that are specifically targeted to this part of the society.
Thank you, Evie. Emily, as an end user, as it were, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this.
So as I said, before he was diagnosed, none of this ever crossed my mind. You know, I would go out with my typical neurotypical daughter. At the time, she was about a year older than he was when he was diagnosed, and none of this ever really cropped up. When Sam was little, and he's in a small-ish normal baby stroller, it doesn't really crop up either. However, he now has a much bigger wheelchair type stroller. It doesn't necessarily look like a wheelchair, but it also doesn't look like a small stroller. It is big, it is heavy, it is wide, and these things cause us, you know, some issues when it comes to going outside the house. There are some places that I will go very easily and very happily. Carrefour is one of them. They have wonderful Caroline's carts, so I can transfer Sam from his stroller into a Caroline's cart. I can push him around the supermarket really easily, do my shopping, he's happy. We will get to checkout, there's a wider checkout, and it has the signs up and it has lots of signage. Now, the local Carrefour, to me, they got very used to Sam, and their security personnel were wonderful with him. There were 4 main people who just loved him, who would talk to him, even though they know he will never talk back to them. They would always do high fives. They would always talk to Sam. They wouldn't talk to me. They would reach over and they would talk and interact with Sam. That's very important to me, because he's not just sitting in a wheelchair, you know, or in his stroller. He is a person. He will react very strongly to people around him. That's one of the key aspects of Angelman syndrome, is actually that they are very sociable. They want to reach out. They want to touch you. They want to smile and see your face. And the manager of the checkout area got very used to seeing Sam. And one day I went and the checkouts were being refurbished, and I said to him, well, my sign has gone. You know, the sign that says this is a priority checkout for people of determination has gone, and this was Wednesday. And by the time I went back in on Saturday, it was up. There was more signage. There was more, you know, more things had been stuck. Now, this is a very strange kind of situation for me. When I go to a checkout, and it's a priority for people of determination checkout, you would think that people would appreciate this. They don't necessarily. So it can make life very difficult for me, because I have to put my really, you know, get my really thick skin going and say, look, excuse me, you know, Sam has got priority in this checkout. And I remember one gentleman, British, maybe about 60, and he turned around and I said, you know, Sam, excuse me, has got priority. He just looked at me, looked up and down at me, turned around and ignored me. And this is not acceptable. So this is another reason why I change or try and raise awareness so much, is that I know Sam can't speak. but I can, and I will definitely stand up for his right to be able to go through a priority checkout. He doesn't understand waiting. He can get frustrated, and this is just Sam. I mean, just think of all those other people. And I've helped before at a Carrefour checkout. There was a family, so a child and a parent who were both people of determination, who both had the ID cards, and who'd shown them, and were being when their progress through that checkout was not being facilitated by members of the public. So that's kind of an area where I'd really like to see some staff training, so that the staff, step up and say, look, excuse me, this person is very clearly in need of this checkout. You will need to move back. But I find that very often it's me doing that, and it's not the staff in the shop. And another example of where I do go and where I don't go is a beach that does or doesn't have access for Sam to get down to the water's edge. There is only one beach that I know of in Dubai so far, and that's Kite Beach, where there is a ramp that goes all the way down to the water's edge. That's fine. I can push him and his stroller, come wheelchair, all the way down to the water's edge, and he can enjoy it like everybody else. But other beaches, that doesn't exist. So I can't do it. I can't push him to the edge of a walkway, for example, on Kite Beach, and then maneuver him and all his equipment and the things he needs to the edge of the water. So there are practicalities that really determine where I go with Sam and where I don't. And parking spaces, I know you touched on them. Parking spaces are not always available, number one. And number two, it would be really useful if people could put above the signage what the rules and the penalties are for someone who parks there without the permit to do so, because people do not see that. And I make it a point that if I see a car parked in those spaces, sorry to anyone who does that and who doesn't have a parking permit displayed, I will report them on the We Are All Police app, because that makes Sam's like that. Sam is entitled to that space, and people who are able to walk perfectly fine, but who wish to save 5 minutes off their shopping trip, that's not acceptable, because if there's only one space, Sam can't go there, and Sam then can't access the mall, for example.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think we've all discussed this at some point through the session. The enforcement is actually the challenge. I think the implementation in terms of the foundations are there, but making sure that they're all of these kind of initiatives, if you like, are being enforced is where the challenge is. So you've spoken about your kind of daily challenges. Is there anything that you feel that we as an FM industry can do to assist with that?
I think the staff training. I mean, I would go to my local mall, and the is it the traffic management? I think that's what they call them. The people who sort of direct the traffic around the mall car parks and so on. They would get very used to seeing me. And they would get very used to me going over and saying, excuse me, this car doesn't have a permit, and I can't park here. I've had to go out of my way in order to go and park on the 3rd level, for example, because people who aren't entitled to these spaces have been parking here. So they got very used to me, and they would come up and they said, I've checked, I've spoken to this person, I've told them they can't park there, and so on. So a lot of it is to do with the staff training, as I said, just to enforce what the provisions that you have made for people of determination, to ensure that these provisions are being implemented as much as they can be. That's very, very important. I mean, it's not about just having a space there with a sign above it. If you don't help stop people who are not entitled to those spaces, for example, parking there, then it's almost for nothing, because those people will never change. Their attitude will never change. They will continue to feel entitled to park in that space, and they won't think about the people for whom those spaces are actually designated.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. Lionel, if I can bring you in at this point, I mean, as a consultant looking at sort of strategic FM, I'm very keen to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, I was wondering how to answer this question, because it's such a broad issue. I think from a design point of view, we know all the theory. I mean, whether you're here or in any other developed country, the regulations are pretty clear. Building regulations, all of the facilities that we should be putting in are pretty well documented and are specified. Standards are pretty much universal and international. So I think from the physical side, it is pretty much covered. Again, it's a sort of mutual support group here. I have every sympathy with Emily. And what bugs me is, even as an able-bodied person, and I know the UAE is not pedestrian friendly, but you've only got to go 50 meters and find some ramp across a pavement that blocks the pavement. And I'm not only thinking about people that need wheelchair access. You know, think about people with impaired sight or hearing or anything like this. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the municipal people do. You know, they grant these permissions, but it seems to me that no one actually takes it much care in the inspection afterwards and follows through. And then, as we're all saying, it really is then about attitude and empathy and understanding to make sure these things are properly applied and properly managed and properly controlled. So, you know, practically, I think everything is there to be done. It's that willpower and that willingness, people cutting corners who don't see the issues, don't seem to understand. It's very real for some people, and it affects their livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. The policing, I think, is one of the areas where we need to focus in on a little bit more. Lionel, you mentioned the regulations and international standards. Other than building and parking access, are you aware of anything else that the UAE government has in terms of regulations that are standard requirements for people of determination that, you know, we should adopt in FM?
Well, for sure. I mean, I think the Federal Law 29 is where the people of determination is specified. And if you read it, there's a lot of material in it. It's not really just about the physical space. It's about, literally no one should be disadvantaged at all. And it's pretty clear. And if you take it seriously, we should be applying that in our facilities, in our offices, if we're in an office, in our workplace, whatever that happens to be. And it's pretty clearly spelled out. It's actually quite encouraging. The issue is, as we keep saying, is influencing people and promulgating the need and the information to get people to follow it. You know?
Yeah. Well, that actually brings us on very nicely to our second straw poll question, which is more of a quiz than a question, guys. So this is for the audience. We have three options for you. It's almost like I feel like a game show host now. So the question is, Abu Dhabi launched the landmark strategy for people of determination in September 2020. The program includes, is it A, 10 initiatives over 3 years in 4 fields with 3 teams and 14 entities? Is it B, 30 initiatives over 5 years in 8 fields with 6 teams and 28 entities? Or is it C, 50 initiatives over 10 years in 12 fields with 9 teams and 42 entities? Oh, that was a bit of a mouthful. I hope nobody's Googling this. I'm sure there are a few people that probably are. We'll give you a few more. I mean, it's just a bit of fun, really, guys. The reason we're asking this question again, because there is such a lack of awareness, especially in the FM industry, in terms of all the regulations and all of these sort of government initiatives that are happening that include everybody in our society. So it's just a question to see how aware you are of it. So honestly, I don't know the answer to this one, so I'll be interested to see what the results come out as. And I think we have enough time to publish the answers, please. Or the results, should I say. Can we see the results? Oh. I think David's behind the scenes giving you guys an extra couple of minutes by the looks of it. Can we release the results, David? There we go. Ah. Wow. Okay. So 56% of people think it's 30 initiatives in 5 years, 8 fields, 6 teams, and 28 entities. I don't know the answer to this question, so I'll leave it to you to go and investigate and basically look up and research for yourselves. But thank you very much for taking part. Oh, it is B. Okay, David's just pointed out the actual answer is B, which suggests that you guys have Googled the answer to me, but we won't go into that. Okay, thanks guys, Let's go on to the final discussion point. I am aware that we're running slightly behind time. Again, you know, the fault is with us, we started late. So we'll probably run a few minutes over 5 o'clock. But the final discussion point is, if we can change the slide. Right, okay. So again, we'll start with Evie. Do you foresee determination program measures achieving greater significance within the wider society, the FM community, and in FM areas of responsibility after the COVID-19 pandemic?
This is a great question, really, and it somehow brings many things together, but it's not an easy one.
Which is why we ask you, Evie. That's the that's the whole point.
So I think we need to stand back and think, what has COVID brought to the surface? What is highlighted through the COVID, the pandemic season? And it goes back to the basics, I would say. There is no status quo. Either you're rich or you're poor, you're educated or you're completely you know, in a different kind of place. Suffering and misery are very universal. Everybody has gone through the same miserable situation, and that has been across the board from every single corner of the world. And it really shows how every single part of this, every single aspect of how we go about life, and every single portion of the society, of the population, is very important. And even the smallest part of society can actually cause detrimental effects to the entire humanity, let's say. So I think it's been quite a rude awakening for everyone, how significant every single person in this world is, and how they can impact the whole picture, the whole humanity. And it was very interesting to see how all the good work of the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Agenda 2030, which is somehow, they call it the blueprint of how to achieve a better and more sustainable humanity for the future. All this great work over the past two and a half decades, we never noticed, and it was providing a complete framework of how the world can be a better place if we really pay attention and really focus on what matters most. And if you look at that, out of the 17 goals, and they are all interlinked, 5 of them are very particular about disability. And they talk about how education needs to be enabled, employment, inclusion, social, political, economical inclusion, and then with regards to accessibility, physical accessibility and accessibility to resources like everybody else, all of that is already there. And I think that's the positive thing. Yes, it's been a very rude awakening, but there is so much work already done in the background. And if we start paying attention, and I think everybody has started to pay attention now, because we have awakened to a new era, we have a path to a sustainable future for every single person on this planet. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Evie. You touched upon employment, and I'm glad you did, because I wanted to ask you, obviously, as you know, as a service provider, you've got a big team there. Do you think more needs to be done in FM to encourage the employment of people of determination into our industry?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a diverse set of skills, and there is a lot of health and safety to be taken into consideration. But I think we can, for sure, a lot of education can be done through our side with regards to teaching skills to people of determination, and at the same time identifying how they can be brought into permanent employment. And as I said at the beginning, I think that that mix of backgrounds and of capabilities and that potential to trigger engagement across the board for the employees because of that higher purpose can really be beneficial for both sides. I mean, there is, from one side, there is that ethical, the right thing to do, and at the same time, there is that benefit that is a byproduct of that process, which is very useful for a customer service industry, really, that awakening of empathy.
Yeah,
sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, we should, our employment diversity should also reflect the communities and societies that we serve, right? So, you know, if we can embrace that, we should, absolutely. Emily, over to you.
Well, COVID was a little bit strange for us. So Sam has a routine. He has a very clear routine. Mornings and afternoons, he expects to go outside and go for a little stroll, a little walk up and down the neighborhood. And then COVID hit, and then we realized that actually there was this provision put in place by Dubai authorities, which said that people of determination would be allowed out of their homes during what was still total lockdown. You applied for a permit and you explained why your child needed to access, you know, the world beyond their back gate, and it was granted. I mean, I think the people who were seeing my requests twice a day got so used to seeing them that his would be approved within about 10 seconds. And so it's this real understanding from people about how we cannot explain something like lockdown to a child like Sam. For example, he does not have the cognitive capacity to understand anything that was going on around him. He just knew that his routine had been disrupted and it was causing him, you know, some mental stress. He would bang on the back gate, he would take our hands, he would show us that he wanted what he wanted. He wanted to go outside. And so we were really appreciative of all the efforts made by the government entities really to understand that these people of determination have different requirements to the majority of the population. And I just started a new photo project called Smile with Sam, where he goes and meets a range of people of determination, but also pets of determination. It came about, it was a bit of a light bulb moment about 4 weeks ago. And I almost live in a bubble with Sam and within a sort of the Angelman community online. But this is really bringing Sam and other children and people of determination together. And it's when we do that that we realize also what challenges they face. You know, the children that he's meeting are not the same as him. They have you know, different genetic conditions, for example, or they have Down syndrome, or they have you know, other cerebral palsy, for example. And the challenges that they face are very different to what Sam faces, but ultimately everybody's the same. And I like to use the tagline really that has been coming out from COVID, which is we are all responsible. So we're all responsible not only for keeping everyone safe, but also for including everyone in society and for remembering that all these people and children exist, and that they haven't been forgotten and that they will continue to be part of our society as long as we continue to engage them and to raise awareness. Because as I said, otherwise Sam could just happily live his life at home and no one would know about him. And that's not going to benefit him, and it's not going to benefit other people of determination as well. And it's also not going to benefit the wider community, because we teach Sam about how to deal with other children, like, you know, be gentle, try not to reach out and touch their face, you know, too strongly. But it's also very important to educate everybody else about Sam and about children like him and about individuals like him. So it's a two-way street. And that's why Burj Khalifa and Imar was so kind as to turn it blue. It was a huge moment, really, because they also created a fantastic video, which has been seen, you know, hundreds of thousands of times, which is just priceless, really, in terms of raising that awareness and making sure that people see somebody who is not the same as them, but who has a lot to offer, even though he doesn't even say one single word. So
it's phenomenal. I mean, what a great accomplishment. Emily, I'd just like to ask you, obviously, you know, we're from the FM industry. What would you like to see from us that will make a great contribution to Sam's daily needs, and ultimately add quality to his life? What can we do as an industry?
I think the thing would be to maybe actually talk to a range of people who live with a range of challenges, and you know, speak to people of determination, or their parents, you know, or their carers, and see what their daily life is actually. The minute they step out of their door and they step out of their home, what are they faced with? And it can be things as small as a sign in front of an elevator. You know, you have two elevators and you have that piece of wall in between. And if I go to some places, I see the elevator, a sign that, you know, that says this elevator is reserved for, or has priority for, people of determination and people pushing wheelchairs and strollers and so on. And sometimes there's no sign. And even just that small bit of signage would make me feel a little bit more comfortable when it comes to telling the people who are all around me crowding to get into this elevator that actually Sam has the priority in this instance. And please, if you're able-bodied, please could you consider taking the escalator, which is maybe 2 minutes down that way, and not pushing in front of Sam. And it's just things, little things that can add up to make a really easy transition for me from leaving my house to going out to doing whatever I need to do, because I'm not going to leave Sam at home just because he is who he is. I'm going to take him with me as much as I can, to the different experiences that I have during that trip out, and then coming back. So if you imagine that Sam, at the moment, his daily wake up is 4 a.m. So 4:30 a.m. And so usually when it comes to a shopping trip, we've been up a few hours already. So anything that would help reduce some stress and reduce some pressure on me so that it can be as smooth as possible, that would be ideal. But I don't think anyone's really maybe ever asked the families.
Which is why we're having this session, Emily. You know, it's very important, because ultimately, you know, as FM, we are the interface between industry and the end user. So it's very important that we have someone like you here talking to us about your daily challenges. And you know, as you mentioned, it's not big things, it's just the little things that will help. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Before I bring in Lionel on this, just to let you know, guys, we will be having a couple of questions. So if you have already sent a question through, that's great. If not, please feel free to do it now. I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. We've covered most of them already in the discussion, but if there's anything else that we haven't spoken about, please feel free to drop the question in now, while Lionel is about to indulge us with his thoughts.
I was just wondering how to answer this question, because there's a negative here, and I know we don't want to end on a negative note. so let me try and turn it around. I think I'm going to answer you honestly. I think there are, if I pick out the words wider society, and if I look at the glass half empty perspective, my fear is that COVID-19 won't have enlightened people necessarily, because I think they're self-absorbed and worried about their own circumstances, which is nothing compared to the challenges that we're talking about for people of determination. Sadly, that's a fact of life, and not everyone is going to get it or engage. The glass half full side of the answer is, I think people that are sensitive to the issues will understand a little bit more. I think because of the restrictions we've experienced. And if you like, this very webinar is doing what we want to do, isn't it? By promulgating the ideas, the discussion, making people aware, listening to the stories, and hopefully enlightening people to go away and do something about it. So I think bringing in the FM community, as I said before, there are many things we can do with our facilities. And I have to say, it's only in this conversation, hearing about Emily's story and lighting up the Burj Khalifa, some of us are engaged in managing very iconic buildings in the UAE. And there's a challenge. Never occurred to me before about asking the client to light it up blue. But how about that as a challenge? You know, it's relatively easy to do. And if we can be persuasive and join the cause, so to speak, I don't see any problem in that. So I think there's a great deal of optimism, but we need events like this to bring it to light. No pun intended, sorry. And make it happen, you know. So I think there's always hope, of course, and there's always optimism. The issue about society, I think it's mixed. I think there's a group in society that are sort of blind to the issues and don't really want to understand the problems or do anything about it.
Yeah. So, you know, from your perspective moving forward, so how we can bring sort of FM, you know, bring this important aspect of service delivery to the forefront is just basically talking about it as we are today, having more discussions and bringing it, you know, to the forefront of our service offerings. That's what you're suggesting, is it?
Absolutely, and there are, you know, let's be clear, you know, I come back to the CSR issues. I know a lot of FM businesses in the UK, particularly, really reach out to organisations to engage with them. And if I can put a plug in, I think it's the Dubai Autism Centre are actually pleading for organisations and individuals to engage, to offer internships, help individuals, educate, you know, assist, engage. I think there's no end of opportunity for the industry to get involved. It's not just about making sure the building is fit for purpose. I think there's a wider society issue that we can engage in.
I mean, we have a lot of initiatives in FM, Lionel, for, you know, we do internship programs, for example, and I don't see why we can't offer that to people of determination, because as Evie quite rightly mentioned earlier on, they're more than capable. I mean, obviously, depending on, you know, what aspect of FM, more than capable of doing the job as any other typical person would be. So I think that's something that maybe some FM companies can look at. And, you know, we'd be more than happy as IWFM here in the UAE to help assist with that. Thank you very much, Lionel. Let's go on to the final straw poll question. I know this is part of the audience's favourite because they get to get involved here. So again, guys, 3 possible answers. And the question is, in 2020, wherever I work, travel, shop or live, I have seen determination, generic attitudes and overall awareness improve. Your response, you have 3 to choose from. A, not really, much the same as before. B, yes, noticeable, small changes happening. Or C, definitely specific notable improvements taking place. Please feel free to answer. We'll give you a few more seconds. I am very aware of the time. I know we've run over and we've started a little bit late today. In all honesty, guys, I'm looking at the questions that have come in and we have actually covered those in the discussion. So I don't think we're going to be going into the questions and answers because the ones that are coming to me have already been answered within our discussion. Let's have a look at the results for the last straw poll. Good. So that's some inspiring news and something positive to end with. So 67% have said they have noticed some small changes and that those changes are taking place. Thank you very much for all of you that have taken part in that. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the webinar. I know, again, we've gone over slightly. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting the webinar and these sessions. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Please be sure to join us for the next webinar in the series, which will be happening in November. David will be providing the upcoming dates and the events for your diaries, but just before he does, I'd like to sincerely thank all the attendees and the participants for tuning in today and taking part in the straw polls and Q&As. Of course, a huge thank you to our brilliant panelists, Evie, Emily and Lionel, for sharing their expertise and knowledge on such an important and significant subject, which needs far more exposure in the FM realm. A big thank you to our amazing support team, both in the UK and here in the UAE, which obviously without them, these webinars will not be possible. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank our sponsors. I think I've already mentioned them, but I'd like to mention them again. So we've got Adib FM, Quality Refrigeration and Air Conditioning, BFM and Tafawuk, which is an Eltizam company. On behalf of IWFM, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to you all. So it's time for me to sign off and bid you farewell. Until the next time, thank you very much for tuning into this really important session. It's goodbye from me, and I will hand over to David, I believe. Are you online, David? Yes?
I will. I'm there. Thanks very much, Sarah. Thanks to all of the panelists. To Evie, Emily and Lionel. And all I want to do now really is just to run through to be able to give you some notes for your diaries. Coming soon, 17th of November will be the next in our series in terms of webinars, number 7. We'll be looking there at technology in principle. And then in mid-December, relationship management, and that'll be in all directions, both with customers and with supply chains. Early in the new year, in January, we're going to start giving you some training and professional development courses that you can enroll with via IWFM. Some of these are running all the time now, and there's a new campaign for those which are online, which you can do yourself, or you can take part in an organized course online. So there are the links down below. Everything that you've seen so far will be recorded or has been recorded, and you can play it back. A link will be sent out via the IWFM website on the community pages. So you can always watch this again, or further to that, pass the link on to others that you know who wish that they were here but couldn't be. Your feedback's important. You'll be asked some questions as you shut down along these lines. But other than that, that's all for me. Thank you very much for joining us today on Tuesday, the 20th of October. And I wish you all stay safe and stay sane. Thanks very much.
Thank you.